Good morning. I want to welcome everybody. Some from last time, some new. So most of you know Lama Yeshe. So he is, as you know, the resident Lama from Hay River KTC in Wisconsin. And we began last night with a little introduction to forgiveness, and he'll continue with that today. I didn't mention last time that much of his knowledge comes from his spending 8 years in prison. As a prison
chaplain.
Chaplain.
Prison chaplain.
So without any further ado, we'll pick up where we left off.
Yeah. So, well, as you know, I had Jessica pass the Kleenex around. And the reason why I had her do this is that I talked about the Buddha and the Four Noble Truths like a physician to a patient. And what forgiveness is really healing. We're talking about healing here. And with a wound, you have to know where the wound is before you can treat it, before you know how to treat it, before you can put the ointment on it and bandage it and so forth. And with emotional wounds, we frequently don't even know that we have it because we try to bury it. And part of the healing process is finding those wounds. And when we find them, sometimes tears come. And so I feel I've done a good job if people start crying. So I don't purposely do that, but just for instance, as a prison chaplain, the prison would not pay for tissue. That was an extravagance that they weren't going to pay for. So on my desk I would have a roll of toilet paper for these men, adult men. And actually, that reminds me of a good prison story. People seem to like, they like Prison Break on television. Yeah. But what this story is about is how our minds can take direct experience and blow it up so far from reality that it has no relationship to reality. We develop this, it's like we're sitting next to a commentator and we're watching a movie, and then the person next to us is telling us what's going on in the movie, their version of what's going on in the movie. And we start listening to them and quit watching the movie. So this was the story that as a prison chaplain, we had a library that was completely independent from the main prison library. It was a chapel library with religious books and so forth in it. And inmates could come and check out the books, but they had to return them. And I had, and actually talking to a librarian on the outside, we had a much better return rate than they did on the outside. We knew how to find them. And so if I had inmates that worked for me, that they took care of the library, and if a library book was overdue, they would send out a notice through, you might say, the prison mail system, and it was overdue, and if it was still overdue a week or two later, another notice. The third notice then would go on my desk, and I would call up a guard in their unit, their housing unit, and I would say, send Joe Smith down to the chapel. And that would be usually all I would say. I wouldn't say why. So one time the inmate I came down to the chapel, came into my office, and he was shaking like a leaf. He was Afro-American, but he was white. Seriously, you know, he was just totally traumatized. And I said, just sit down, you know, sit down. And this is what happened, is that as soon as he heard over the PA system, go to the chapel, he thought the worst. Somebody has died. You know, and he's going out, the other inmates that are standing around hearing this would say things like, oh, this isn't going to be good, and so on. And so as he's walking over there, he told me he was literally praying, dear God, he was a Christian, may it be my mother and not my father. You know, it's really funny when someone else does this, by the way. And so when I told them, you've got an overdue book, yeah, if we can see this in ourselves, we've really come a long way. Because we do this all the time. We really do. We do it all the time. For those of you that are older, if you remember Gilda Radner on Saturday Night Live, oh, never mind. You remember that? Yeah. Yeah, you're a little young maybe for this. That's all right. Youth has its advantages. But anyway, so that is a little story and an example of why you don't want to do these things. Keep trying to connect as much as possible with what's happening right now, rather than what is thoughts you're generating in your mind about what's happening. So I haven't even gotten to the first point of what I wanted to talk about today, but that's all right. And that kind of goes back to these tender spots and the possibility that you might tear up, and you might not, and if you don't, that's fine too. But that it's fine when you are meditating, or when we're going to be doing some practices today. If you do find that there's a tender spot there that's causing you to feel that your eyes get watery. My eyes get watery too. Rinpoche's eyes get watery. It's a good sign. It's a sign that you've got a warm, soft, tender spot. And that's where we're all going. So last night I mentioned that when we run into difficulties, we tend to blame ourselves for the difficulties. We tend to get down on ourselves and say that I keep screwing up, I'm always doing the wrong thing, I'm a blank, blank, blank idiot, da 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 da. I said that that voice inside of us is like an internet troll. And what I didn't cover was why we run into difficulties. By the way, the other thing that we do when we run into difficulties is say it's the other person's fault. Somebody is causing me a lot of difficulties. It's their fault. If they would just yada, 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 then my life would be a lot better and easier. So what I want to talk about this morning is why we run into difficulties. And so I call this talk here, the 5 unrealistic expectations of samsara. And as I said last night, samsara is this cyclic existence that we live in that has these 4 sufferings of birth, old age, sickness, and death. It also has the sufferings of that we can't find what we are looking for. We can't find what we want, or we can't find enough of what we want. And the second is that when we find it, it doesn't last. Another is that we find it and then we decide that we really didn't want it after all. What is that, buyer remorse? Kind of that. If you've ever been in a relationship with somebody and then all of a sudden you go, what am I doing here with this person? That's kind of buyer remorse. We change our minds, and all of it causes suffering. So that's samsara. But now there are 5 unrealistic expectations that we have in samsara, and they are all related to our ego. Since this is a Buddhist talk, we've got to get into ego. It just doesn't work any other way. But the first one is, I am the most important person in the room. Yeah, we really feel that way. And so wherever we go, I'm the most important person here. It's a pretty big room. One of the problems with this is there are something like 6 billion people on this planet that think they're the most important person on the surface of the earth. Some of them might feel their children are more important than them, but you're probably not one of their children. I remember a blues song. I was thinking B.B. King, who sang this, "Nobody loves me like but my mother, and she could be jiving me too." I wasn't a monk all my life, by the way. So we have this unrealistic expectation that we should be the most important person. Then the next one is, I should be respected. That other people should have a feeling. I looked up the definition for this, and it's a feeling of deep admiration for someone as a result of their qualities, abilities, achievements, and so forth. We all want respect. We might not be able to give respect, but we want respect. And needless to say, when we don't get it, we suffer. When we realize we're not the most important person in the room, according to other people in the room, we suffer. The third is, others should live up to my expectations. And not only that, I shouldn't have to tell them what my expectations are. I was married for 21 years, and 21 years I kind of felt this way about my spouse. She should know. She should be a mind reader. Well, needless to say, it doesn't always work that way. People don't live up to your expectations, and if you don't tell them what they are, how can they know? And quite honestly, if you tell them, they still aren't going to live up to them. Because it was a two-way street, this marriage that I was in, you know. I did the same thing to her. The next one is that I should not be harmed in any way, bodily, mentally. My agenda shouldn't be harmed. At work, my ideas are the best ideas, and how come I'm getting flack from my co-workers? So this causes a lot of suffering. thinking that this is not normal. I talked about this is a first world problem, you know. But these problems are all over the globe. It's just that in this country we have higher standards. You know, it takes a lot less for us to get irritated and upset with other people and circumstances that we are in, because things are so smooth here. Things work out so well here. It's amazing how well things work here. But this is the nature of samsara, is no matter how good they are, they can always be better. And that's the way we think. How come they're not perfect? How come the people that I come in contact with aren't perfect? How come I'm not perfect? So the last one is, life should be fair. And I'm the one that decides what's fair. Yes, I see a few heads nodding in this one. But this is, you know, this is what we take through life with us. And of course, these expectations can't be met. They absolutely cannot be met. Again, it's surprising how often they are met, but it's impossible for them to be met for any length of time in all the different activities that we're engaged in and all the different people we come in contact with. And quite honestly, the last thing you need is to have someone that's always agreeing with you, as they say, a yes man. You want somebody that when you're going off in the wrong direction that says, hey, wait a minute. Wait a minute, maybe you should take a step back and look at this. So, it's important to realize these and to try to find when you are falling into the trap of believing any of these 5 expectations. So now the next point that I want to talk about is going over Buddha nature again. I talked about it last night, and that is that the Buddha talked about all beings. Not only all people, but all animals, all beings in all other realms too, having a mind. The definition of a sentient being is being able to distinguish between happiness and suffering. It's awareness, being aware, and that if you can distinguish between happiness and suffering, you have a mind, and what goes along with having a mind is Buddha nature. This, of course, the mind is not made out of substance. It's indestructible, it's unborn, it's undying. The Buddha nature is unchanging. And it's complete perfection. It is complete purity. It is completely formless. It is complete limitless love, complete limitless compassion. You might say it's everything that we would ultimately wish for. Contentment, peace, and so forth. That's inside of all of us. It's unchanging. The only difference between us and a Buddha is a Buddha removed the obscurations that are covering it up and keeping us from experiencing it directly. We can get glimpses of it, There are certainly times when we feel compassionate. There are times when we feel loving that is separate from attachment. Much of what is called love today is merely attachment to pleasure. You feel good with that person. You know, it's a really pleasant experience being with that person. But love is wanting that person to be happy, regardless of your happiness, which is a little higher bar. But anyway, we all have glimpses of this. We all have glimpses of wisdom. It's coming from within. And so the Buddha nature is within. And so when it comes to forgiving ourselves and loving ourselves, and this is where forgiveness starts, by the way. The reason why I'm talking about forgiving ourselves first this morning rather than forgiving other people is you have to know how to forgive yourself before you can really forgive other people. So you build on it. So we start with loving ourselves, forgiving ourselves. So if you have Buddha nature, and you do, maybe I should say if you realize you have Buddha nature, then you realize that that is what you can love about yourself. You don't have to do things to earn your love. You can love yourself even when you make mistakes, even when you do things to hurt yourself, even when you do things that hurt other people, even when you do things to make yourself look stupid. This is what makes you worthy of love. You have a mind, you have Buddha nature, you are just as valuable as anybody else. Last night I said that when I talk with people individually, it seems like the way they look at themselves on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being perfectly wonderful, fantastic, close to enlightenment. The other is 1 being a mass murderer, that they look at themselves as being maybe a 1.5 or a 2. Because we can tend to have this whole list of all the things we've done in our lives where we've screwed up and done things wrong and hurt ourselves, hurt other people, look like an idiot. Our ego is so easily bruised that we think bruising our ego is non-virtuous. Actually, it's kind of good to bruise your ego. But we hold on to all of these things for years, for decades, perhaps for our whole lives. And then we think that there's nothing lovable about us, that we have to earn our loving ourselves by being perfect, and since we're never perfect, we're never lovable. But what I'm talking about here is realizing who we really are and seeing that all these actions that we have engaged in are temporary, impermanent. They come and they go. And that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the consciousness that experiences pain, experiences happiness and pleasure. So we don't have to earn love to love ourselves. We can love ourselves like a mother would love a newborn child. The Bodhisattva Chenrezig, you chant Chenrezig here, I know that. His facial expression is described. He's looking at beings like a mother looks at her newborn infant, with that kind of love. The infant doesn't have to earn it. We don't have to earn Chenrezi's love and compassion, and we don't have to earn our own love and compassion. We can be like a loving mother towards ourselves. And of course, a loving mother wants the child to grow, to learn, to improve, to be toilet trained, for instance. But when the child isn't, she doesn't spank it when it makes a mess. She knows that the child can be trained. So it's really important to realize that you are worthy of love. You are worthy of giving yourself love. And that you are worthy of forgiving yourself. That whatever it is that you have done, it's not unforgivable. And then another point is that Buddhas cannot forgive. We're all trying to become Buddhas, but actually a Buddha can't forgive. The reason is that Buddhas don't hold on to anything. And if you're not holding on to any anger, aggression, hostility, what is there to forgive? And as you travel the path and become more able to forgive and more able to look at your emotions and your feelings and so forth, you'll find much of what you're holding on to in terms of grudges and angers and so forth have no basis in reality, and you can just let go of them. That what you were angry about was really making a mountain out of a molehill. This is where wisdom comes in. And so you're finding that you're getting less upset. You have less road rage. That when difficulties arise, it's not a problem. And so you both get better at forgiving and also find that you have much less that you're holding on to that even needs to be forgiven. So with that, let's see here. I'm going to go into forgiveness, the meaning of forgiveness here a little bit deeper now. I have 6 different definitions of forgiveness that I got off of the internet dictionaries here. And so the first one is to grant pardon for or remission of an offense, a debt, and so forth, to absolve. The second is to give up all claim on account of, to remit a debt or an obligation. To grant a pardon to a person is the third one. To cease to feel resentment against, as if to forgive, as in to forgive one's enemy. And that seems the one that's closest to what I'm talking about. But also it says here, number 5 is to cancel an indebtedness or liability. to forgive the interest owed on a loan, and then to pardon an offense or an offender. And all of these are, slightly different in the definition, and all of them could be applied to the forgiveness that I'm talking about. I kind of like this idea of canceling an indebtedness or a liability, because it says to forgive the interest owed on a loan. Because as we hold on to grudges against people that we need to forgive, it's like we collect interest on it. We can actually get madder and madder and madder at them over the years. Or towards ourselves. We can get madder and madder and madder towards ourselves to the point where we want to commit suicide. It builds. Suicide is an act of anger towards yourself. In most cases. So it's more than just giving up resentment. It is really understanding what's going on and giving up, you might say, a whole array of different attitudes and behaviors. It's also taking responsibility for our feelings. In a way, forgiveness is empowering yourself. You are taking control of your emotions rather than letting them control you. I like to say certain things upset us and bother us and make us mad at other people and need to forgive other people. And basically what's happening is they're pushing our buttons. And, well, we installed those buttons. And as you know, if you have a digital device, not only can you install the buttons, but you can uninstall the buttons. So these tender little buttons of ours that get pushed during our daily lives, we can learn how to uninstall them, or at least deactivate them. Sometimes I get things on my computer that I don't know how to get rid of them, but at least I know how to deactivate them. So this forgiveness is actually very empowering. It's not weak, it's not cowardly. It's actually an act of bravery and strength. When we hang on to anger, we exaggerate the importance of the actions that feed the anger. We dwell on it and we lose perspective. As I said, we make a mountain out of a molehill. There are a lot of moles where I live, in my yard, in fact. As a Buddhist monk, I can't kill them. So I just kind of level out the molehills and then keep on mowing. But they're definitely not a mountain. They're not that high. And little things can just build up and build up and build up in us. And what happens then is we're not reacting to the little things. We're reacting what has happened in the past. We're reacting to a whole group of things, and we overreact. I remember a story, this happened out at KTD many, many years ago when they had the old house and they did not have the new building there for residential use. And there was a public phone right by the dining area. And people would call all hours of the day and night. And I would be one of those people. And I heard this story once. And of course, the staff would be the ones that would be there most frequently, and sometimes, usually they would be the ones that would answer. And they would get frustrated, at these calls coming in. And so there was this call that came in very late at night, and one of the staff members answered it and immediately started yelling at the person that was calling before they even knew who it was. It was like, enough is enough, I'm drawing the line here. And when they stopped spitting their vitriol, then the voice on the other line said, "This is high C2 Ricochet." That's what you call overreacting. But we do that too. We do that all the time. I do that. And this is where the wisdom comes in, is reacting what's happening right now in the present, rather than what has happened in the past. And again, this is how you gain control of your emotions, gain control of your feelings, gain control to forgive. And in a case like that, there's not even anything to forgive. You're just embarrassed. Well, then you have to forgive yourself. You have to forgive yourself. And it's embarrassing. So, as I said last night, that what I'm talking about here is forgiving what has happened in the past so that we have room to grow in the future. We forgive in the present what's happened in the past, so we have room to grow in the future. Just like gardening. Now, again, last night, and there's some people that weren't here last night, so I'm going to go into this a little bit more, that when we are learning to forgive ourselves, we need to understand the difference between guilt and remorse. Because we all do things that we regret doing, or it would be very beneficial if we did have some regret at doing them. And actually, what I have found is that if your meditation practice is going well, that you are going to find more and more actions that you have done that you regret, because you become more aware of what you're doing instead of just mindlessly plowing through life. You become more aware of what you're doing and how it affects you and how it affects other people. So having remorse is good, realizing that you have done actions of one sort or another that have been harmful to yourself or other people. But guilt is a problem, which is when you realize this and then you start beating yourself up with it and saying that you're a bad person, you're fundamentally flawed, where you've got that voice inside of you that's like an internet troll that keeps telling you all these bad things that you have done. You're an idiot. You always screw up. You're always looking like a bumbling idiot in front of other people. People are laughing at you behind your back. is guilt. You think that there is something fundamentally wrong, can't be changed. I have run into so many people that think they're not worthy of giving themselves love. They're just not worthy of it. They are so bad. It's actually a huge obstacle. So it's really important to realize that you are worthy of giving yourself love, that you can forgive yourself, that whatever it is you have done, you can forgive yourself. Most of you have heard the story of Milarepa, who killed 35 people, and he purified that. Again, I don't see anybody in here that looks like they've killed 35 people. You probably wouldn't be here if you killed 35 people. I'd have to go into prison to visit you. But even he, through devotion to his teacher and practice, he purified all of that and attained realization. So if he's worthy of loving himself, you are worthy of loving yourself. By the way, one of the names that he was given was indestructible laughter. Repa Dorje. I think he earned that name with his laughter. So this is really an important point to remember, is that you are worthy of love, no matter what you have done. You cannot negate that. And that guilt is just another klesha. It consists of anger towards yourself and also laziness. And there are three types of laziness in Tibetan Buddhism. The first is what I call couch potato. We all know that. Where is the remote? Where's my beer? Let's kick back in the lazy boy and spend the afternoon. And maybe you'll go to sleep in between after the beer gets down. That's the first type of laziness, where you can't even get up out of bed in the morning, you can't accomplish anything, you don't want to accomplish anything. The trash piles up, and the dirty dishes pile up, and so forth. The second type is busyness, compulsive busyness, where you are too busy doing things that are not terribly important, and you don't have time to do what is important. And shop till you drop kind of thing. It could even be compulsive house cleaning. Compulsive activity of any kind. Going to the movies, joining clubs, just whatever. There's a million different things in the world today that we can do to keep busy. And I cannot believe how busy life is today in this country. There's always something to do. There's a problem with that. I have done programs at KTD and other places on trauma, healing from trauma, and at one of them 2 Vietnam veterans attended. And they were in the same unit over in Vietnam, got to know each other after release. They didn't see each other. Married, had relatively successful careers, retired, and now they were no longer busy. And both of them started drinking and doing all kinds of self-destructive things. And one of them, for some reason or other, started coming to the Columbus KTC. Came in contact with Buddhism, and started practicing and so forth. And then found out about this program at KTD that I was leading, came to that. And then for some reason I got in contact with this buddy and told him, you should come too. They both came. And basically that was their story, that they could keep busy, and that kind of kept the depression away, but it didn't solve it. And then when they couldn't keep busy enough anymore, then it caught up with them. And so that's that second type of busyness, is just keeping very, very busy, and then you don't have time to let that troll get you. The third type is self-deprecation, and this is non-recognition of the Buddha nature, thinking that you're just somehow fatally flawed, you're worse than other people, you're a one or a two, and since this is the way it is, there's no point in crying, even. It's a hopeless case. Those are the three types of laziness. So when you put in laziness and the anger towards yourself, you get depression. And of course, the answer to that, the answer to the anger towards yourself is love. The answer to the laziness is diligence, as well as recognizing your Buddha nature. Recognizing your Buddha nature is the answer to the self-deprecation. Diligence is the answer to the couch potato. And I would say wisdom is the answer to the mindless busyness. Wisdom is being able to differentiate between what's important and what isn't important.